Well, there's been a lot of talk about the CAS review from the UK recently, which has all but nailed the final nail in the coffin of sending our vulnerable children down the path of believing they can change their sex. But the mainstream media were keen to push back on some of that research with a local anecdotal story, and they found one. The problem was that it did more to back up our arguments. Let's check it out. So before we look at the article, here's a really interesting point, as we're all told that less media is a threat to democracy and we're all going backwards if media outlets close. Well, during the weekend, 5 independent mainstream media outlets, Radio New Zealand, News Hub, One News, New Zealand Herald and News Talk ZB, who all apparently add to democracy, reprinted the same exact story. Criticism of puberty blockers misguided, trans girl's mother says. All 5 mainstream media outlets printed it. Exactly the same article, same words. News Hub, you'll notice, managed to sort of muddle up the order of the title just to make it look a bit more original. But remember the mantra, more independent media outlets is good, apparently. They all printed word for word a story that originated out of Radio New Zealand. So let's check the article and have a look at what it says. The mother of a transgender teenager says having her child come out at the age of 8 let her and her family take a deep collective breath. However, as far as their daughter was concerned, now remember this is a biological boy, a son, was concerned, they accepted it immediately, Kylie said. As soon as he told us who he was, then we just went with that. And then behind the scene, we did quite a lot of gathering of information about what would be the best way to keep her safe and keep her well. I'll go with the pronouns that the article is using, but we're talking about a biological boy. Responses from those around them were mixed. Some were supportive, others not. We had to educate the people around us at the same time we were learning ourselves. 8 years old coming out, knowing as a biological boy that he was a girl. Really? And educate the people around? Persuade would be a better word, and indoctrinate might be another. It goes on. At that stage, there was no need for medical interventions. Within a couple of years, however, puberty was looming. And at that point, she let us know very clearly she did not want the changes that would come to her unless she was given something to give her support. So he was fearful of puberty. It's a human experience that every one of us goes through, the natural process. But because of a flawed ideology, this young boy is petrified of it. Now, in fairness to Radio New Zealand, there is some discussion on the CAS report and how puberty blockers virtually always lead to cross-sex hormones, and that there's concern about the harm of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. And the article says this: nearly all children on blockers subsequently progress to a medical transition using hormones. Correct. But here's what one of the lead New Zealand doctors in this radical experiment says, and I just came across this clip a couple of days ago. This is from Paddy Gower's Paddy's Got Issues series, when they talked about the issue of puberty blockers. This is from the middle of last year, and it was after the Ministry of Health had quietly removed the statement about puberty blockers being safe and reversible. But we were watching and called them out on it. Now, have a watch. And it starts with the presenter talking about the background of puberty blockers and the massive increase in New Zealand. And note that the doctor they talk to is a member of none other than the radical activist group PATHA, which is associated with WPATH. And watch how she contradicts what even the Ministry of Health is saying.
Use has ramped up in the past 10 years. In 2010, there were 137 young people using them, and it's gone up every year since. Last year, 771 people were on them. Before September last year, the Ministry of Health had said this about puberty blockers on its website. Puberty blockers are a safe and fully reversible medicine that allows people time to fully explore gender health options. But in September last year, they quietly changed it, taking out the part that says safe and fully reversible. It's a big debate, so I went to find out what puberty blockers are all about.
Puberty blockers are a medication that are used to just pause puberty. They can't turn it backwards, so they can't reverse changes that have already happened, but absolutely they can just pause things. So this, if you imagine if physical changes that are causing distress are occurring, by stopping those can be incredibly beneficial, on a physical level and on a psychological level.
Not true.
But if you were to stop those puberty blockers, puberty would just kick in again.
Auckland paediatrician Dr. Rachel Johnson is currently seeing a variety of patients, from young children to people in their 20s.
Over 10 years of following young people who are on blockers, well, I do think that accessing puberty blockers in the context of the way that young people can in New Zealand is really appropriate. They're not some universal treatment for every trans youth. A youth, that's always a really carefully considered decision whether, the benefits outweigh any potential risks.
Are they safe and reversible?
No.
I would absolutely say in the years of experience of using blockers and based on the worldwide evidence that they are a safe and reversible medication.
Yeah, just refuses to acknowledge the science. They're stuck deep in the ideology. And this is someone from Patha, so you can see, and Patha have the air of Te Whatu Ora, and so you can see why Te Whatu Ora, the Ministry of Health, are both very slow moving on this, and they'll have a lot to answer for. So back to the article. Kylie said blockers gave the family time to think. Sexuality and future fertility, those are really big conversations to have at 10. So the idea with puberty blockers is that you don't have to have all these conversations at that age. You can wait until your child is more appropriate age to talk about those things. Oh, so 10 is too young to have conversations about sexuality and future fertility, but 8 years old is enough to start socially transitioning. Preferred pronouns, use the toilets and changing rooms of choice and uniforms. There's a lot of contradiction in this article. Going on, before her daughter was prescribed puberty blockers at 10, she had multiple visits to a paediatric endocrinologist, a full medical assessment, including blood tests, a hand x-ray to assess bone density. Actually, that's one of the negative outcomes of puberty blockers is osteoporosis. And an appointment with a psychologist, and at 14 her daughter started using estrogen medication. So cross-sex hormones at 14, and as expected the puberty blockers didn't pause the transition, as our doctor told us, they predict it. Puberty blockers don't pause transing, they predict it in virtually every case, as the research shows, and completely contrary to what our Patha doctor said earlier. She is unusually young, he is unusually young to go on HRT, usually in New Zealand, not given to teenagers younger than 16, depending on what area you're in. The doctors were willing to make an exception because of the thoroughness of the psychiatric reports done and the length of time that she'd been out. At 14, she'd already been socially out for 6 years, so it was not a fly-by-night decision. The teenager was offered an option for fertility preservation so that he could still father children, which would require her to stop using puberty blockers and go far enough through puberty to allow for the process, but that was not an option they wanted to take. He's 14 years old. Chloe Cole, the American California girl who detransitioned at 16 years old and is speaking at our conference in July, said she also didn't think about the consequences. She said it was the last thing she thought about. Have a watch.
I went through the process of going through a social and medical gender transition between the ages of 12 to 16. I started medically transitioning at 13 with puberty blockers, testosterone, and at 15, I underwent a radical double mastectomy to remove my breasts. I stopped transitioning at 16 when I realized that I wanted to be a woman, that I was very feminine, and that I wanted to become a mother and have children of my own. And these treatments were potentially taking all of that away from me. And since then, at the age of 17, I've been speaking out about what happened to me. I've connected with many other people who have detransitioned as well. And I've testified in many legislatures across the United States, and even to Congress on my 19th birthday. And I'm looking forward to coming to New Zealand in July and seeing you all there.
Yep, and you can hear Chloe in person at our conference in July. Go to forumonthefamily.nz to register. But the media, and Chloe is a girl who wanted to be a boy. Our story here is talking about a boy who wants to be a girl. But the media don't want to know about the Chloes of this world. I mean, they're too young to drink or to get a license or to enter into certain contracts, but they're old enough to destroy their fertility for life. And what 14-year-old is thinking about having children? Just finally, it says, our daughter is a happy, healthy, normal 17-year-old. She's done extremely well at school, is off to uni. She's got a great group of friends. She's in a relationship, doing all the things you'd expect a 17-year-old to do. We've never been concerned that her intellectual or psychological development has been stunted by her being able to express who she is. In fact, our concern would have been the damage from not being able to express who she is that would have been done to her, that she would have to work through as an adult. Or maybe, as the recent Dutch study found out, he would have grown out of the gender confusion if he was allowed to go through puberty, because the majority do. And I don't think anyone argues that chemicalizing and castrating your body affects your intellect or that you can't make friends. But aren't we just encouraging a confusion and potentially creating a health crisis in terms of infertility, osteoporosis, chronic illness, emotional dysregulation, and there are other risks that the Cass review has revealed. In fact, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration in the US, issued a warning label about the risk of puberty blockers in 2022. And it's, that's a warning label that our Partha doctor doesn't want to acknowledge. Just one other red flag in all of this. It says, the eldest child, who is now 24, came out as non-binary a few years after her daughter. Look, it's all very sad, and it's what experts call family noise. And what do we mean by this? It was covered in our report, Boy, Girl, Other, which is available on our website. And Canadian Kenneth Zucker, one of the leading researchers and clinicians in the world on this topic, and he was the chair of the group that determined how the issue would be handled in the DSM-5, which is the medical Bible. He found that gender dysphoric behaviour and identity in children cannot be assessed without looking at what he calls family noise, and that gender dysphoria seldom manifests in a child isolated from other factors, particularly those existing within the family dynamic. And this is strongly verified when observing the family interactions of such children, as well as their parents' reaction to these children. So it's driven by the convictions of the parents often, rather than the child. In fact, the Amsterdam Gender Identity Clinic, one of the largest clinics in Europe treating gender dysphoric children, looks at a host of larger satellite issues with the child and their family beyond the dysphoria itself. And these would include parallel emotional, behavioural, family issues that might be present that could impact the child's dysphoria. Look, it could be online stuff that they're looking at, TikTok, social media. It may be their group of friends and that rapid onset gender dysphoria that has been discovered. They explain dysphoria does not generally stand alone. And so all you can do is feel sorry for this family that they're going through this, but they're being aided by the medical profession to go down this track. Now, the New Zealand media have covered this story, and as you saw, All of them reprinted the exact same story, all these independent media outlets, but they're trying to counter the Cass Review and all the research and the overseas trends that are seeing the transgendering of our children narrative crumble before our eyes. And they're even working together on it. It's not even original. They're just copying the same article. Look, it's time to stop the confusion and the chemicalization and the castration. It's time to heal the mind, just like we do with eating disorders that lead young people to think differently to the body reality. Tell your local MP that it's time to stop the abuse of our vulnerable young people. The trans ideology's time is up. Biology matters and always tells the truth.